Hi, I'm Marshall Adams. I'm a cinematographer on Better Call Saul, and this is the Go Creative Show.
Hello and welcome to the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. My name is Ben Consoli, and today we speak with Marshall Adams, the director of photography of Better Call Saul, Season 6. Marshall, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, well, thank you, man. It's great to see you. Thanks very much, Ben. It's great to have me.
Yeah, we've had you on at least, I think we've had you on twice before. Once for El Camino, and I think we had you on for Better Call Saul as well.
Last season, yeah. And
yes.
Actually, just to clarify, this season, I actually only shot the odd number episodes. Paul shot Paul, my A-camera operator actually, he's been the operator since season 2, shot the even number episodes.
What's Paul's last name? let's give him a plug here.
I never remember how to pronounce it. It's
you don't know how to pronounce it.
Donachie. That's it. I was finally corrected. Paul, and all the years we worked together, he never told me so that I was mispronouncing his name all this time.
Paul Donachie. There you go.
Yeah.
So you did, and that is carrying through to the second half of season 6, I'm assuming too, right?
Yeah. Now that mid-season break was never actually planned. I think it was born out of necessity for post mostly. But so yeah, it wasn't written that way, and we certainly didn't shoot it that way. So
that's interesting. So you that was never intended. That was because that's kind of a common thing for people in their last seasons. Ozark did it. Sopranos did it. A bunch of shows will sort of break things up on their last season. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think even Breaking Bad did it
exactly.
also, too,
yes.
Right? Yeah. They were one of the first. But yeah, no, it was never planned that way. It just that's just kind of the way it fell down, and also, and that crazy finale to the last episode. So, which I hope people have seen by now. But anyway, yeah. So it wasn't planned that way, but it's oddly how it landed.
How are you feeling now with Better Call Saul wrapping up for us as audience members? I mean, there's got to be something bittersweet about putting a show like this to bed. I mean, really, talk about ending on a high note. It's just got to feel something. What are you feeling?
Oh yeah, I'm sad to see it go. I really am. It's been one of the best experiences of my career for sure. But also, because it was the last season, we got to put a lot more into it. We had, more days, more time, some, which I think was partly aided by COVID, but anyway, so yeah, we really did it. We did it right this year. So that, that was part of it, but yeah, it's bittersweet. I will miss it for sure. Any
memories, moments you can share from the very last time you were on set with the crew? Like, what did that day feel like? How do you leave a show like this and just know that you're not going back to it? Like, it's got to be such a strange feling. I mean, everything that I do is very short terms, commercials, a corporate video. You're on set with people for 2-3 days maximum. So you don't have that same connection.
Yeah, I mean, this was, multiple years actually, and I had done one episode of Breaking Bad, so I'd met most of these folks back in 2012. So we're talking, 10 years all in. Yeah, it was tough. I mean, everybody was choked up. I mean, I remember even Jonathan, who finished maybe a week before we did, and gave a talk to the crew. He was just absolutely in tears, and grumpy old man, he just choked up completely. So it was really sweet. It was, and Bob and Ray, they did a really nice send off. We were finished with a scene with them, and at the end they both talked for a long time about, what a joy it was to work with us and get to know everybody. And it's a real family for sure.
Well, you're giving the fans one hell of a season, that's for sure. And it really all begins. I mean, you can tell from the very first episode of season 6, like, this is going to be a season like none other. And I'd like to dive in a little bit to that episode, because so much happens that is just so different and unique and worthwhile of a conversation. And personally, I want to know about, starting with the opening sequence, which anybody that watches Better Call Saul, that your opening sequence is going to give you a little clue into what's going on with Saul now, like what's happening now. And it's usually in black and white. And this time, it's black and white for a few seconds, but you see a whole bunch of ties sort of falling into a well, you don't know what it is at first, but it's revealed that it's falling into like a moving box, and the ties are black and white, and then they get colorful, and you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, this is in color? Is this not a flashback or a forward? What is going on? And you just become instantly disoriented from what you're expecting from Better Call Saul. And then it just goes into this amazing oner shot with the camera flowing through Saul's home as movers are there moving stuff out. It really does feel like a choreographed ballet in a way. And I was so surprised to hear when researching that episode that this was a dance troupe that you used. Yeah. So yeah. For the talent, tell me about that opening scene and how you achieved it.
Well, so I think a lot of the things that you just talked about were brainchilds. When the script came out, it said we are in glorious color, which was kind of surprised people as it was. But Michael Morris, who was our producer director this season, he directed a couple episodes, season 5 and one season 4. Just a fantastic director. He had that idea about the box, which I absolutely loved. And as we progressed and we realized that scene was going to be this wonder, it just began to make more and more sense to get people that could choreograph, could hit marks, could keep time. That was actually the original thought, was actually that we were going to play, play a song or something, or a time keep of some sort. So anyway, so that was all Michael's idea. So we actually spent an entire weekend with that dance troupe in that house, choreographing every one of those scenes to the second.
Wow.
And then came back the next day or two actually and shot it. So yeah, it was, and it just paid off. I mean, they hit it time and time again beautifully. We could make final, little tiny adjustments. But when you start on a set, kind of trying to build that, it takes a long time. So it saved us an enormous amount of time. And it just was, we could see the magic in it almost immediately. Even when I'm walking around with my phone, it was like, wow, this is really going to be cool. So
how were you keeping time? You had mentioned you were considering playing an audio track or something. What did you end up doing?
Yeah, it ended up being our first AD just basically kept track of everything and was cueing people actually on the spot. But they could tell, they got to the point after, and we did a little bit, we played a little bit of music during some of the rehearsals, but it got to the point where they just knew the exact moments that they had to be in places. And also, the hard part is we never know what the music track's going to be up front, obviously. So you don't want to get them going too much in a direction that it's not going to end up that way. So, but anyway, yeah, that was all Michael. Rich Stickler, my first AD, the guy I was joined at the hip with all season long, was just fantastic. He was actually in episode 5. He was the crazy looking guy with the mohawk that was standing out of Saul's office.
No way.
Tattoos on the side of his head painted. Yeah. I love Rich. He's awesome. But anyway. Yeah, he got all set up. I mean, he obviously got dressed for that part, but yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So when you're working on a scene like this, and you know that you have a pretty substantially long oner shot that goes through this entire place, how are you preparing for something like this? I mean, obviously, you need to be able to have your camera move around unencumbered with no problems, but you also need to light in a way where kind of everywhere you land, it's exposed correctly and it's exactly what you want. So can you talk to me about how you sort of strategized that opening scene?
The big thing is I work really closely with the art department all along the way to make sure that if we have a set like that that's got practicals in it, that we're going to see the whole thing. Obviously, it's all about bulb choice and what kind of bulb it is and what exactly we're trying to do with it. So I work closely with the art department and the set dressers to make sure that we could do that, especially in that inside area there. That was actually, that's a real house that we shot in Albuquerque, where the bed was like a living room area, and that whole closet was actually the bedroom. So we moved through that whole thing. But yeah, mostly it's working with them and making sure that I've got the stop that I can handle inside, because it was all natural windows in the original bedroom there. And then the whole thing with the bed, and we had to make sure that thing could light up, and it was they built that thing all from scratch.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very cool. But yeah, so yeah, and then obviously all of the big pieces. I mean, those big plaster pieces that some of those folks were carrying were real heavy, statues and things like that. So,
Yeah. And then you were saying that you had natural light coming in sort of those bedroom scenes and largely the entire thing. Were you really just letting it go natural, or like how are you handling that?
I think I warmed it just a teeny bit, just to kind of take a little bit of the blue off, because when we went inside the closet where all of the ties and everything. Well, I don't know if everybody noticed the Panavision hat that was in there too, by the way.
No.
One of the corners as we kind of go around, there's a Panavision hat there from the time that he was working with the kids from the university, remember? And he was directing and he had that silly Panavision hat. There are so many Easter eggs in those scenes. Man, it's unbelievable. But so we went in tungsten. In that whole closet area is all tungsten. It's all warm tungsten. But then, we did that on purpose. I did it on purpose so that we popped the colors, because that was the big thing. I mean, it's seeing all those ties and those silly pocket squares and all of the range of colors in there. It's just fantastic. And then obviously the safe room reveal and all that stuff in the mirror was was a lot of fun.
And what are you flying?
Obviously.
In the safe room, in the safe room, it's all fluorescent.
Yeah, just on uncorrected fluorescent, just to make it go green and feel it, make it feel kind of like what it was supposed to be, at least.
Now, from a lighting perspective for that scene, are you operating from a dimmer board and like going up and down on it on brightness throughout the house?
I've definitely done that many times. I didn't in that particular scene. We had I do have a single channel remote so that I can control the stop remotely as it goes. So I can open up a little bit if I need to, or close down a little bit, but I try not to move it too much. So yeah. But yeah, we have a fantastic dimmer board operator on the show, so yeah, we've done that too. Because when you come around 180 degrees, the light that was backlighting you a second ago is now going to create a camera shadow. So as you probably well know, so yeah, you almost have to. You're kind of forced into it, to a certain extent.
So you're sitting there at Command Central. You're looking at your monitors. Are you physically like changing your f-stop and adjusting anything on the fly, like as you're working your board?
I don't work the board, actually. Yeah, oftentimes my gaffer will cue the dimmer board operator if we have cues in there. But no, I am definitely controlling the stop. I'm adjusting it all the time. The big thing is to make sure I don't overdo it, so then we have to undo it later on. But which has happened a couple. Or you get a hit, you get a radio hit on air, and the thing pops a little bit or moves a little bit. But for the most part, it works really well. I was a convert. I started out, coming from film, I never touched the stop, and they kept saying, "Well, you want a remote?" No, I'm fine. And then finally, I caved in, and then now I can't keep my hands off the knife.
So you resisted for a long time?
I did, because it was from the time when you gave the assistant the stop, and that was it. You weren't, unless you absolutely had to do something, and that was all done by hand on the lens. They're not even on the lens anymore. So anyway.
When did you start? When did you start embracing that as a technology?
I would say that it probably was actually when I came on to the third season of Saul.
Really?
It was something that Arthur had set up for him. And I'd thought about it, in the past, and I just decided, I'm just going to, it's just as easy. I can put it in here as I can tell the assistant, obviously, and pretty soon I'm touching it a little bit, and then now I'm opening up a half a stop, and it's hard to leave it alone sometimes.
Are you the type of person that in normal circumstances, are you a little resistant to the new kind of filmmaking technology, and you almost need to be convinced that it's worth your time to investigate?
No, I wouldn't say that. I'm pretty open to new technology. I think it's just I was on a series at the time that was all film, and it stayed film. We didn't go digital until 2010, I don't think so. I mean, it was late. So yeah, so that, it's just it was a way that I had worked forever. But I mean, I certainly adopted lighting with LED technology and even KinoFlow technology. I was on the leading edge of that. Working with Frieder and on a series that I did called Babylon 5 back in the day. We were some of the early adopters of some of his stuff.
Yeah, I think that the LED stuff, I think, was an easy thing to jump onto because it's so convenient. And yeah, I mean, it didn't have the warmth and whatever of tungsten. It's getting better, but just the convenience is unbelievable. Like, that's an easy one to jump onto. It was amazing. Like, not even that long ago, we were having discussions here on Go Creative Show, and just like, do we really need to shoot 4K? Like, there was a resistance in bumping up to 4K from HD. It seemed like that was a bigger resistance than the LED lighting. And I know I'm dating myself in the show, but it seems like from a technology standpoint, people were more resistant to the 4K jump than they were to LED lighting, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and well, I mean, I guess it's there are archive costs involved, so there's a certain amount of studio influence there too. Actually, I did a pilot not that long ago. They wanted me to shoot in 1080. I was like, still
recent.
Just over a year ago. Yeah, the pilot for the cleaning lady. Yeah, we had the camera package all built, and they were in the middle of prepping it, and all of a sudden I got a call from the producer saying the studio called and said, "What are you doing with a 4K package? We're delivering in 1080. We're not even going to archive in 4K." And so anyway, we went round and round, and they finally just ended up saying, "Okay, fine, we'll do it for the pilot." And then of course they fell in love with it, and now that's the way the show's done.
Oh my God, that's wild.
Yeah. Well, I was blown away. I was absolutely mystified.
It's still going on today. Are there technologies that you are starting to see now kind of creep into professional work? Is there, like, what are you seeing is the next frontier of filmmaking at your level?
I think it probably is, some smaller cameras, being able to get large format looks with smaller and smaller cameras. I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, those little cameras have a very specific look and depth of field that kind of gives them away. But they're getting, bigger and bigger chips into those little tiny things. And if you can get that kind of depth of field, we did some mount cameras that we did every kind of strange, new, trying things out. We did the boxing scene with a head mount camera, so we could have the gloves in the foreground. We weren't, last season 5, it was season 5. Yeah, we dropped a camera down through a drain chute. They were supposed to be a drug delivery that was going that way. And so we found that little camera that would fit through there. And so, yeah, I mean, we're always on it all comes from Vince, all those crazy angles and places that you have to try to get to. And oftentimes it means getting into the tiniest camera you can get your hands on,
Did you, I think I read that you guys used a Blackmagic pocket cinema camera for a scene in season 6?
Yes, that scene we're talking about right there. So we got a smaller gimbal, the I think it's the RS2, the new DJI RS2. Anyway, but we flew the Blackmagic with actually they're Zine. We have a set of Zine Prime. So at the beginning of
what's a Zine Prime? I don't think I've ever heard of that.
Yeah, so it goes. Back to El Camino, we were going to do a scene in that junkyard where we were going to crush the camera. So we got a Blackmagic cinema camera, and we were going to put it in there, and we got these really funky little lenses that were very inexpensive, XEEN, right? They're Ronicon. Anyway, but so we obviously didn't want to spend a bunch of money on a camera and a lens package that we were going to squish, but needed to be prepared for it if Vince did that. So at the last minute, he changed his mind. We didn't actually crush the camera, so we've been carrying that thing forever with that little tiny set of primes, which has worked out really great. I mean, it's been a great camera. Now we upgraded to the 6K Pro this year, but that's what was on that gimbal that was walking through that whole opening scene in Saul for season 1.
I'm looking at them now. Rokinon Zine Primes. Maybe we talked about this when we talked about El Camino. I forgot, but I have it here, and I'll put it in the show notes so you guys can check it out. But they're Rokinon Zine Primes here. Oh, look at that. So you ended up
And
not crushing the camera, and you carried them around into this season.
yeah, we used that thing on, so many shots where we didn't want to obviously jeopardize one of the Alexas, or, it was a fit. As a matter of fact, there's the shot that really sold me was on Bagman when we were in that place where they were dismantling that bloody car and the two cousins pull up. So we had two cameras over the car, and that shot, the reflection shot of the in the puddle there of the cousins pulling up, which was one of the broadest exposure ranges of about any shot I think I've ever done. And man, that camera just held right on and gave us a great picture. So I was absolutely convinced from that moment on that that camera could handle just about anything I could throw at it.
Yeah, and sometimes too, like it's weird. It's like those small little, relatively inexpensive cameras sometimes have the most robust like control options. It's wild. It's like the more professional cameras are a little bit late to the game when it comes to I keep wanting to say manual control, but it's the total opposite that I'm saying. Remote control. The small cameras seem to give you those features when the big ones don't. So like I imagine with Blackmagic, you probably had a lot of great control features.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and again, I had I got the remote stop on there and we have, a complete control of that camera. You can change this. As a matter of fact, that whole opening scene in episode 1 was all shot at 36 frames. You can see it's obviously slightly slow motion. So, which we had to do a bunch of tests on, make sure we didn't have any flicker problems, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, no, it's, and you're right. It's all very accessible. Anything you want to change quickly happens very quickly. It's a really well-built camera. I love that thing, man. It's really, really been great for us.
And since we're talking about cameras, let's talk about your main camera package for Better Call Saul. What were you using?
We were using an LF Mini this season, so we've changed just about every season. But the LF obviously we used for season 5. The Mini wasn't out yet, but when we went to the Minis, we had 3 Minis that we carried this season, and they're Panavized, and we used the Panaspeeds. As our main prime lenses, and the ingenue small, what is the heck of the name of that? The zoom. Anyway, I'll think of it in a second. But but mostly primes. We pretty much stick with the primes on that camera. It's and I love it. I mean, it's the color science with the Alexas is just fantastic. And
yeah.
But that again was kind of born out of necessity. It was Airflex didn't have a 4K camera yet when we did season 4, and then in between doing El Camino, I used the Alexa 65 and just was absolutely sold on their imagery and color science. So that was the easy one to convince Peter of, making the change back to over to the Alexa. And
single camera this season, or did you throw in some other angles?
Oh yeah, no, we shoot 2 cameras almost all the time. I mean, we have them both available too. If we have any full A camera, B camera complement. But we have. The thing about that show is that we don't ever put the 2 cameras side by side. We don't use it to get 2 setups at the same time. We're always kind of looking for a more interesting angle, something else that would advance the story rather than get coverage. So that's our big thing, because the coverage camera really only has one great place to be, and you start putting 2 in there, and then you're compromising them both. So yeah, we're firm believers in that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I just directed something that was more on the comedy side, and we opted to have 2 cameras, one on each talent, just because we didn't want the performance to run dry. And it's non-union. We're not using like union talent and all that. So, but definitely, you do compromise when you are just setting up for 2 angles at the same time. You're compromising your lighting. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and sometimes even that cross coverage, although we've not above doing that. I mean, I remember in season 5, Ray and Bob had that scene where they eventually end up talking about getting married, and it's a big kind of a surprise at the end. And they really wanted it to be fresh, and they wanted, and the director, who was Michael Morris also, wanted to be able to intercut the takes. So we actually, I sacrificed a little bit of the lighting quality. It wasn't too bad, but we cross-shot that coverage so that they could intercut the actual takes, and that's exactly what they did. But that's once in 4 seasons that they've asked me to do that. So.
At a good moment, too, because that was one of those scenes where you're like, oh, I think I know where this is going. And, oh, gee, I guess I don't. So,
hard left turn. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what these guys are known for. Oftentimes, it seems like, they did some really amazing stuff with the writing.
I want to talk about a shot in the first episode of season 6 that begins with this just incredible, super extreme close-up of an ant on a fingertip and pulls out to, a relatively medium shot as it pulls out. But it is such a dramatic move and so unexpected. Even in the world of Better Call Saul, when you kind of expect the unexpected with some of these shots, it still surprised you, which is really a testament to just how great you guys are. Talk to me about this shot, because there must have been some incredible logistical challenges to pull this one off.
There was, absolutely. We discovered that Laowa probe lens in season 5 with the original ant sequence. One of my loader, Jesse Heidenfeld, actually turned me onto it. But so that lens allows us to get to those places that you can't get. It can focus all the way down, almost to the front element, and it's a 24 millimeter lens. I'm pretty sure.
What was the name of the lens?
As close as. It's a Laowa, Laowa.
O-W. I'll put a
Laowa
link to this
probe.
in the show notes, guys, so you can check it out. But sorry, continue.
No, that's okay. So again, Michael had this idea that he wanted to try out, and we actually again brought, while we were still in prep, we brought I was actually our stunt guy and the ant wrangler and everybody on stage, and we rehearsed this with the crane to make sure that it would work. It was even possible, to achieve what we wanted to achieve, because there was some specific timing that had to happen with the sun too. So it had to happen in there was like a 1 hour window that was going to work. So we luckily had rehearsed it, but of course we get out there and the ant that they were using was, I don't know what, clumsy, drunk. I have no idea. It kept falling off the finger, and it looked like we weren't going to be able to do it in one shot, that we were going to have to somehow break it up. And all of a sudden there was just this magical take that happened, and that was it. I mean, Michael was just over the moon, and that's obviously the take that they used. So yeah, it was surprising. The ant pulled together for us. Goes to show you never know what you're at the mercy of, right?
I was so curious too, like the management of this ant. I've done animal stuff before. I've worked with raccoons and cats and dogs and all sorts of stuff. And it's such a, like when you have an animal talent on set, it's a whole thing. And I was wondering, watching that, I'm like, I wonder if there was someone like dedicated to the ant performance. I had to know, like what, how did,
not only that, not only was she dedicated to the ant performance, but the animal, the Humane Society is there to protect the ant. So wow. She's there making sure that we don't do anything to abuse the ant. So she was right there just off camera, and she would literally move back as the camera was moving back so that she could get right back in there and put the ant back up and kind of direct them a little bit. But how do you direct an ant, right?
That is so insane. What do you do? Like, was she like flashing things? Or, I mean, how do you get the attention of an ant? It sounds so crazy.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Yeah, they've got these really soft little tweezers, and she picks them up every time he fell off and put him back on the finger. And I kept trying to think, well, what the heck is the ant thinking right now? What is going on? It just get me off this darn thing. And thankfully, the actor, the guy that had been in the episode, in the season finale at the end of season 5, that big shootout, was one of the assassins there. He was such a gamer and willing to sit there, and he's in the sun, it's cooking and the ants crawling all over him, and he doesn't know if it's going to bite him. And it was anyway, he was great. He had all that prosthetics on, and he was fantastic. So
I was actually going to ask you if it was a real hand or not, because I'm thinking at that close to not have any movement at all in your finger, that's like incredible. I mean, obviously the guy's not really dead. So it's like the finger, just the slightest, teeniest movement that close up is going to be magnified.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Although, I mean, I mean, he didn't. He was amazing that way. But I mean, I know on other shows, I mean, when I did CSI, they would do that, things like that all the time, where they had to make people dead. You mean, obviously, people breathe, they twitch, you have involuntary movements that you can't control. So, but yeah, I don't think they did with him. He was absolutely dead still, and even I'm sure, with it going, through his mind that ant could bite him in any moment if you really got pissed enough. But yeah, it just, it was one of those magical Better Call Saul moments. So, it just, you don't anger the movie gods by asking for another one or questioning the gift. You just take it and move on.
Exactly. Good advice. We've got a question from Truett Morrow on our Instagram at Go Creative Show. How has the season 6 evolved? Well, actually, his question's about how have all the seasons evolved, and you've certainly worked on enough of them to speak, from a perspective of the entire series. But what has been the visual evolution of the show, and sort of where is it now in season 6?
Well, I mean, I think it's developed in its own way to a certain extent. Saul is a much more stable, landed show. We don't do push-ins, unnecessary. Maybe do a half a dozen of them all season long. And for me, lighting-wise, it's progressed into a much more natural-looking environment. That was going back to what you were talking about, embracing new technology and the digital. That's one of the things that I've discovered along the way with the digital that I don't need. I can light with practicals mostly on the street. Adding street lights rather than putting big condors up and stuff like that, which I find looks much more natural. Kind of embracing the natural imperfections of street lights. The sodium vapor, or whatever it may be. So that's kind of progressed. It's gotten a bit darker, I think, as has the story, as it kind of moved closer and closer to the, colliding with the Breaking Bad world. But I have to say that I went out to lunch when I took the job the first time with both Vince and Peter, and at that first meeting, they said to me that we would rather you go too far and have to reshoot something than to feel like we left something on the table. So, and Peter's one of those guys, he's had an American cinematographer subscription since he was 12 years old. I mean, I couldn't find my rear end with both hands when I was 12 years old. He's really that visually oriented. So, and really loves cinematography. So, and obviously Vince too, but, very much so. So, it was, going darker and trying new things and experimenting with stuff was right up their alley, and they loved every bit of it. So it's been an absolute pleasure working with those guys, as I said before. But yeah, so it's I would say it's gotten darker. I think we've gotten a little closer and wider as we progress to slightly wider lenses. I mean, the LF, the large format frame allows you to be wider with a lens that's not so distorted. So that's part of the thing that I think has happened a bit with the LF. But yeah, it's just been a collaboration, as that whole thing is. We are all firm believers that we're all better. We're better artists as a group than we ever could be individually, and so together, we'll come up with something that we all love very much. So.
Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, for that matter, are kind of known for these really interesting angles and strange shots and different perspectives, and we've talked about a couple of them just in the first episode of season 6 alone. Looking back on all the work that you've done with Better Call Saul, do you have a favorite one of those types of shots, like one of those signature Better Call Saul unique shots?
Oh boy, I don't know.
There's probably so many. And also, where does that influence come from? Because it is a signature of the show.
It's absolutely comes from Vince. That was an idea that Vince, he always wants storytelling wise. And then, of course, and again, it always has to be driven by the story. We never do a shot because it looks cool or whatever. It's got to advance the story. It's got to be driven by story. But, as a storyteller, Vince has always wanted to get into places that you wouldn't normally be able to put a camera because nobody even thinks that, at the front of, looking through the hole of a gas cap as somebody unscrews it and pours gasoline into or whatever it may be. So, and he loves to do everything in camera, like all of those scope shots, all of the shots through the scope and Bagman, that's all done in camera. We had an A7 II that we would set up with that scope pushed up against it and shoot everything through it. So that's kind of where it was driven from, but it's evolved, and I would say 90% of them are actually in the script to begin with.
Really?
They're written, yeah. That group they stay together for a very long time, and they're very collaborative. Even though each individual person writes their own script, but they're very collaborative in the development, and they come up with those things together. And then season 6, Vince who hadn't been involved the last couple of seasons as much. I mean, he was, worked as a director, obviously, but wasn't as involved in the writing because of COVID, was with them for the entire year. And so they all wrote all together and has a lot of his influence in there, obviously, as you can imagine.
Yeah. I mean, what I guess a silver lining in everything that went on is to have those relationships kind of deepen a little bit because you're basically like in a bubble with these people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to a certain extent, he wanted to be involved, even if there wasn't, because he was, it was the end of the universe, and something that he created, and obviously has been a huge influence on his own life. So, and everybody else's. So, yeah, absolutely. I think he wouldn't have had it any other way. He directed 3 of the episodes. None of the ones that I did. I don't know if I should be offended, but. All even numbers.
He's like, is Marshall doing that one? I'll pass.
Okay, I'll do the next one.
Exactly. Another thing that Better Call Saul is really known for, and Breaking Bad as well, is these just absolutely stunningly beautiful desert vistas. That, I think one of the things, we had Michael Slovis on. It was one of our very first shows for Breaking Bad's final season. And at that time, we were talking about these just desert vistas and how it's such an important part of the series. And it carried on with Better Call Saul. And each one of them has always really given you a feeling. They're so intentional, and they never just feel like, oh, just send a second unit and grab a couple shots. It always feels so intended and specific and story-driven. And sometimes you don't even know why. It just has a feel to it. So I'd like to talk to you about the way that you approach these kind of iconic Breaking Bad and, Better Call Saul desert vistas.
Well, first off, I have to say it's a gift from New Mexico right from the beginning. I mean, there's, you have to, you look up and you go, man, oh man, how you turn around and half the crew's, off taking photographs in the background, and you're like, maybe we should take advantage of this. But also, story-wise, Vince, from the very beginning of Breaking Bad, really shot that show as a feature film style. That he wasn't going to pander to small screens, and they've gotten even smaller. That he was going to really shoot it in his own style, and a lot of those, because like you say, they have a very strong. They bring on a very strong feeling. They really can tell a story. So yeah, and I think this crew learned early on not to move in too quickly, because you never know. We can jump out and do one of those wide shots when either the weather, the sun, the clouds, whatever is just right. So yeah, it's always in the arsenal, especially if the opportunity presents itself. That whole back area behind where the studio is, which is where all that stuff pretty much is shot, unless we go to like Tahajali specifically for like we did on Bagman. But again, it's New Mexico, man. You can't go wrong there. You really can't. It's those beautiful clouds, and especially in the summertime, they're just gorgeous. And the air is clear, and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
How are you structuring your days, knowing that you need those wide exteriors? Like, are you sending a second unit out, or is that something that your first unit team is doing?
We have, but I mean, one of the things about the show is we have almost always have the actors in the shot. We don't really do
Yeah,
shots
that's
just
true.
for shots. So if you do send a second unit out, you have to send them with the talent. We did it on Bagman for a few of those scenes. Gordon, the guy that wrote it and actually directed episode 3 this season and episode 4 last season, he would go out and do some second unit with the actors if we had some time. But that's the big thing. I mean, it almost always has to be done with the A unit because it involves the principals and it's obviously part of the storytelling. So yeah, they so rarely do those shots where it's just about the background. It's it happens, but not that often. So.
And when you're in these exterior locations for Better Call Saul, what's your approach to daytime exterior lighting wise?
Well, like for most, as it is for most, I check the sun paths. I try to put us in a lot of backlight whenever possible. We try to time the day so that's the case. But I also, I have to say, and this is probably a good bit of advice for some of the young up and coming filmmakers, that when we went to the location scout of the Painted Desert on El Camino, and we were taking photographs all around and shooting the whole location and trying to figure out, we realized that the backlight really didn't show the color of the Painted Desert. And so, and that it really looked better in either like a side light or a front light. So we ended up actually going in a complete reverse direction on El Camino. So, keeping your eyes open and being open to those ideas, because I mean, as a cinematographer, that's the cardinal sin, shooting in front light. But occasionally something like that comes along and you have to keep your mind and your eyes open for it,
So you found in season 6, after your experience with El Camino, that you were just embracing the front light for these desert shots sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah, because it really can help show the colors and really pop, some of the background. So, yeah, it's just more about kind of keeping an option open that that anything can happen. That all of a sudden you can see something, and it's like you can't always be sure that your rules are gonna be the right thing.
So in season 6, we've really established this Saul versus Jimmy situation, and there's an at oddsness to it. There's a change in this character over time, not just obviously a name change, but becoming Saul for Jimmy meant something more than just a name. Like this was setting up for what eventually becomes Breaking Bad. There's differences in their personality. There's differences in their movements. He's evolving as a person. How does the camera and the lighting change over time during that transition from Jimmy to Saul?
Well, I don't know that it necessarily did that much, because I mean, Bob really brought so much of a difference, and then obviously the third character being Gene, which is a whole different persona. I mean, I having done all 3 of them in 3 days. In 3 separate, connected days, I really noticed the physical differences that he brings to all of those characters. It's absolutely uncanny. But so for Gene we have the black and white, which is a whole different thing. Mm-hmm. And for Saul, for a lot of it, whenever I mean, not as Saul was developing, but whenever we flashed forward to him, we shot film, because they shot 35 on Breaking Bad. So like the opening of that episode I think it was 503 last season, that was all shot, when he's in his office and he's packing to get out, he's about to go on the run. That was all shot on 35. So that's part of the look change. And this year we actually did it more with a grain introduction, because to completely change out the camera packages was going to be too tough for any of those flash forwards, and there are a few along the way. So, but yeah, I would say it's kind of a more saturated, and there's a lot of makeup on Bob, because they when he is Saul, at least in the flash forwards, he was a little heavier back then, so they try to duplicate that as much as they can. But also, we do a lot of that stuff with the lenses too, getting closer and wider and really getting expressive for that stuff, trying to get in people's heads, being on the back of his head a lot when you can see that, what he's looking at out of focus behind him, but it's more it's kind of more important to be in his head. I mean, those are all things that we definitely did more of as we went along, and as he kind of made that change. And also, now, as he made the change, at first Kim wasn't kind of along for the ride, and now she's kind of driving the whole thing. So his unsurety, about that whole thing is also part of it too that we have to embrace. So.
There's two things in season 5 that I wanted to talk to you about, and I'm not even sure if you shot these episodes. So if you hadn't, then certainly let me know. But first thing, it seems like Better Call Saul is so aware of the filmmaking industry in a way. Like it almost like jokes about just what filmmaking is to begin with. There was a particular episode where Saul is filming his what ended up being like the blackmail tape for Mesa Verde, when he was making had actors playing Mesa Verde customers and all that. Did you shoot that episode?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right. So the dialogue in that, I was watching the show with my husband, and I'm like, this is what every shoot is like. Like they've captured the essence of corporate video production and low budget commercial video production so perfectly in this scene. And for those of you guys that haven't seen it, just imagine everything you've ever experienced on set coming to life. It's like, I'm watching that scene. I'm thinking to myself, like, you guys get it. Like, you understand the plight of small, corporate, inexpensive video production. It just made me laugh. And I just wanted to kind of get your take on that, because there's so many little Easter eggs and tongue-in-cheek moments. And I think you really did the industry well by highlighting what it's like to do stuff like that.
Again, that's it's funny. That's such a collaborative thing. A lot of it was on the page with those three guys. They're spray painting the sheets to make them green so that they can get the green screen going. And then Bob behind the camera, hit it hard, but not too much. It's like, but a lot of that was him riffing too. I think a lot of what they used was him. When you turn Bob loose with comedy, man, you just have to get out of the way sometimes. But yeah, and I'm sure he's heard most of those cliches along the way too.
Oh my God.
But yeah, it was so much fun to do. We were, Michael. That was actually, funny enough, another Michael Morris episode. Between Michael and the visual things about the screen and the kids and the camera and what they were doing, and then Bob getting up there and just riffing about everything he's ever heard along the way. It was so good. And it's for us, the best part sometimes is even reading the script for the first time. You're just laughing like crazy and going, oh my God, and it's always ends up so much better than you can even imagine. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, the whole premise is basically like they're trying to do a commercial and they realize it's too expensive. So he does this, tries to do it on the cheap with green screen. And it is just so silly and so hilarious that anybody listening to this show, you're going to think that scene is ridiculous. Even like the build up to it when they're talking about how the producer that he hires is like, you can't do it. You cannot do this in one shoot day. It's impossible. It was every discussion I've ever had with every client.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
perfect.
Yeah, that's awesome. That was
last thing I wanted to mention, and I don't know if you shot this episode. Did you do the episode where they were stuck in the desert? Season 5?
Yeah, Bagman. Right.
No, it's season 5.
Oh, yeah, Bagman.
Yes. 8. Okay. Yeah, great. So, I mean, we've mentioned it a few times throughout this interview, but the whole episode basically takes place outside. You're in the blazing hot desert. There must be some lessons that you learned. I mean, you've shot in the desert so much because of your experience on Better Call Saul. But are there things that you learned along the way that you can share with our audience that, maybe haven't had that experience before shooting in the desert, things you don't necessarily think of, ways to protect the camera, ways to protect yourself? Are there things that people just don't really know making shooting in the desert so particularly challenging?
Well, that was quite the event, let me tell you. Where you put the whole company when we're turning around looking in every direction. is the big thing, and how do you keep people cool? And then obviously Albuquerque is at 5,000 feet, so the altitude wears on you too. So I think it's mostly about staying hydrated. I mean, the cameras actually were the least of our worries, which I was very surprised about. I mean, obviously we tried to take care of them as best we could, but our biggest challenge up there was the rain. We got pushed, chased out by, huge rainstorms.
Wow.
Probably a half a dozen times while we were shooting that episode up there. And that episode, we were doing 9-day episodes. I think we went to 10-day episodes in season 5. And that episode was darn close to 20. I think it was 19 days. Wow. I mean, that shootout on the corner was an entire week. And every possible weather pattern you could imagine, fog, rain, sun. I mean, that's the big thing. I would say the biggest thing is it's easy to over polarize the desert, to get those really brilliant blue skies and really kind of try to pop the clouds. I would say that's the biggest thing is to, and then that I learned kind of early on in trying to match those shots. And also making them feel more realistic, that, you dial the pola in until you got it, all optimized as much as you can, and then back it off just a little bit. So it's not quite so heavy handed, even though it feels right, the other way. But that, and, trying to stay water. I mean, holy smokes, just trying to take in enough water in that heat is just almost impossible. We had whole trailers that were there that had, sprinklers going that people could just go and sit in with a fan going on it, that would cool you off because it was so hot up there.
Those steamers too. Like I just recently gone to Phoenix and went up through up to the Grand Canyon and stuff. All throughout Phoenix, you see all these steamers everywhere. Like it's weird. It's like open air conditioning, just steam, and not even steam. Well, I guess it is steam, but it's like, it's just water basically being sprayed on you, but it's so particleized that it's just misters. That's the word. It's just a mister, and they're all over the place. I'm assuming you had those, and then you have to think where does everybody go? Where every time you want to turn around, you got to move everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And every one of those, I mean, there's, 30 trucks going down the road because that's the only place to park. So, we use a lot of the, the ATVs and trailers as we can, so we can keep the trucks to a minimum. But I mean, even those misters, I mean, that comes in a big trailer. That's got to be there. The camera truck's got to be there. So they stack up pretty quickly. That's the big thing. You got to be really careful that you know when you're going to turn around and that you're working really closely with your transportation captain because at any moment the director go, oh, I gotta go this way now, and oh boy, I just promised him we weren't going to turn around, but yeah, and one of the funny things that actually happened up there, I should tell you, is we were shooting on that corner during the shootout. It might have been the first or second day we were there. And it's on a reservation. It's reservation land. And so they were clear with us that locals would be coming in occasionally. We probably maybe had 3 or 4 during the day. So about 2:00 in the afternoon, this gentleman comes driving by, and we kind of wave to him, and he slows down, he stops, he rolls down his window, and he says, "Y'all better get out of here." And we were like, wow, that wasn't very nice. So what was that about? So off he goes, waves and takes off. So about an hour later, the sky opens up and unloads on us.
Oh,
we are
God.
Throwing stuff into the trucks, and we all go, oh, that's what he meant. Like he could smell it. He'd been there so long. He knew when that rain was coming, and he was trying to warn us, you better get out of here. And we just completely took it the wrong way, but anyway. So, I mean, there was a day that we were there, we got chased off after one shot. We got one shot.
Oh my God!
It was the big stunt. It was the flipping truck, but it was still one shot.
Hey, well, that's a good shot to get off if you have to get it. See, lesson learned there. Always listen to the locals. I guess they always know what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Well, the show, obviously, Better Call Saul. It's coming to an end. It's already ended for you, and coming to an end for us as viewers. And wow, what a ride! You guys congratulations on such an amazing show. I mean, it's just been. so much fun to watch and be part of this world. And I think myself included, and I think a lot of people listening are going to go back to Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad after Better Call Saul ends. I think it's just going to be in a perpetual loop. We will always be watching one series or another for the rest of time. But really, congratulations on the show. It's just fantastic. And good luck with whatever is next for you. And, on that note, what is next for you? What do you got going on?
Well, I'm in Atlanta on a show. I'm in prep on a show for AMC right now called Damascus. It's a little bit different for me. It's kind of a sci-fi comedy, single camera comedy approach, but it's a really great. It was written by a guy who's a playwright, and it's just incredibly well written. So I think people are going to really enjoy it. And then after that, I think I'm headed to LA maybe to do a feature. So we'll see what happens.
Fantastic. Marshall Adams, Better Call Saul Season 6. Of course, we'll have all of your information in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming back on Go Creative Show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Ben. It's a pleasure, man. It's fun talking to you again. It's good to see you.
All right, I want to thank Marshall Adams, the director of photography of Better Call Saul Season 6 and 5 and 4 and 3 and all sorts of things. And he's been on the show a few times. So head over to Go Creative Show, search Marshall Adams, and check him out. He's such a great guest, and we'll definitely have him back for his next project. I also want to thank Connor Crosby, who produces the show. You can find him at ignitionvisuals.com. And of course, Dave Siegel, who mixes and masters and makes the show sound so good. You can find him at siegelsound.com. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, where we put exclusive content and you get to see the conversation. So not just hear it, but see it. So it's a great way to experience Go Creative Show. We hope you guys go over there and check it out. All things Go Creative Show at gocreativeshow.com. And if you want to follow me, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Ben Consoli, BenConsoli. Thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you next week on another episode of the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers.